Within every moment is the power to choose. Your choices determine your experience of life. Choose wisely. Karen Sangster. I am so happy you made the decision to join me today. My goal is that you will leave with something way more valuable than money, which is a method to living a more focused, happier, and meaningful life. One of the things that gives my life purpose is accomplishing the goals I set for myself. I've watched hundreds of TED Talks, and I've always wanted to be on the stage and speak my truth. The only problem is I had no idea what I wanted to talk about. But when the opportunity presented itself, I was ready, and I made the conscious decision to go after it. And now I stand with TED sign behind me as a result of that action, asking this question. Do you realize how much power you have through the choices you make on a daily basis? Granted, there are some things you just can't control, like where you were born, when you were born, who your parents are, but let's get past that. Let's look at what you can control. Some things you can control are your beliefs, attitudes, thoughts, perspectives, how honest you are, who your friends are, etc. I'll give you a moment to look through the lengthy list. My favorite thing I can control is how many times I smile daily. But when you really think about it, there's a lot of power in these choices. And some may even say, our life is playing out exactly how we are choosing it to. You see, a lot of people adopt this idea that life just happens to them, that maybe one day they'll get lucky and get the things that they want. Call me a bubble burster, but the things you want don't want you. That doesn't mean you can't get them. It means you gotta make the decision to go after them. Because at the end of the day, our future is an accumulation of the choices we are making now. For instance, if I want to learn Spanish, then I have to make a series of choices that will get me closer to my goal. Tengo que elegir aprender todos los días. I have to choose to learn every day. Let me drop a truth bomb on y'all. What if I told you our future is created based on the often seemingly insignificant choices we make every single day? Allow me to guide you into a sort of self-reflection. Think about the results of your current choices. Where are you in your relationships, job, health, daily routine? Think about how you spend your time. Now, which of your current daily choices are helping you become your best self? Which ones don't? What are the habits, behaviors, people, and you guessed it, decisions that are familiar but no longer serving you? Are any of these things getting in the way of the life you really want to live? Are you consciously making decisions, or are you a byproduct of your environment? Don't beat yourself up if the answers are not what you anticipated. We often choose things simply based on habit. But by letting go of old habits and patterns of behaviors, you make room for your goals and dreams. One of the easiest ways to see if a choice is worth it is by asking if it gives your life purpose or meaning. Because defining the future requires us to define today. This is a lot easier said than done, especially when some of these patterns of behavior stem from comfort or even worse, past trauma. Mental health issues can often inhibit our ability to make the best decisions possible. In fact, June 2020 data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that 63% of young people and 40% of adults reported experiencing substantial symptoms of anxiety and depression. And before I go on, mental health issues are definitely not a choice. But it's also worth mentioning that if you aren't getting your daily dose of vitamins and minerals, some sort of physical activity, and drinking enough water, your body is physically imbalanced, which may contribute to mental and emotional imbalances. The good thing is, those factors are choices. Now, many people say, therapy isn't for me, and it may not be. You have the right to choose whatever type of emotional healing you desire. But if it's emotional healing you need, make sure to choose it, whatever that may look like for you. Nobody chooses anxiety or depression, but you do choose how you take care of yourself. Another example that somebody out there may need to hear is your friends significantly impact your choices. A 2014 study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that friends can either offer moral support to each other to resist temptations or indulge in these temptations with you. This is why it is so important to choose the right people to surround yourself with. Maybe people that inspire, nurture, and appreciate your spirit. People that will motivate and challenge you need be. People that will help you reach the goals that you want to. And at this point, you're saying, okay, Elijah, I get it. Make better choices. But it's a lot more than that. It's about realizing the control we have over our lives through these decisions. It's about choosing what you want from life, rather than letting life pick for you. We feel tied down to our careers and obligations, and these things can make us feel limited. We consider so many aspects of our lives, often considering ourselves last. But I'm here to tell you, choosing yourself first can be one of the best decisions you ever make. Choose yourself before your job. We gotta make money in order to survive, yes, but there are a million ways to make money. And I challenge you to find a way to make money while making happiness. You have the right to choose what you want to do, and intentional and mindful decisions are likely to result in living a purposeful and meaningful life. Now, close your eyes and imagine it's the future. Go however deep into the future you'd like. You are in bed, smelling the morning dew, and hear the birds chirping. Upon awakening, you realize it's too late to do all the things you wanted to do when you were younger, more able-bodied, or maybe just simply more capable. Feel free to open your eyes when you're ready. I know y'all felt that, but it won't feel as bad as being in that position. Your goals, dreams, and aspirations are first. This is your life. You don't want to wake up and realize it's too late to do all the things you wanted, so make the choice to do them immediately. Now for the light and fun part. Take a pause and write down something you want to achieve, big or small. What are the daily steps you can take to get closer to this goal? Write them down, make a plan, and make choices every day that'll bring you closer to that goal. Stick to it and watch it happen. I'd like to close with reminding you that there are no limits to the experiences life has for us. When you realize the choice is yours, your eyes open to a world of possibilities and opportunities waiting for you to pick which ones you'd like to experience. Don't overthink it. Simply decide. Sangster says once again in the Chakra Insight Oracle, you are holding the reins of your life. Choose who you want to be and how you want to live today, and ride. Close your eyes one more time and say, the choice is mine. Thank you.
Hello, we're here today to talk about everybody's favorite subject in school, and that is mathematics. You might have taken a pause and said, wait a minute, math, I hated that subject in school. Why are we discussing this? Now, unfortunately, math does have a negative opinion attached to it, and we're here today to talk about maybe how we can change the future to get a more positive light on this subject. Let's start off with where this negative opinion is formed. Suppose we're a new student entering college. We declare our major to be business. Somewhere in my education plan, I'm going to have to take a math class. Whether it be college algebra, statistics, it has to happen. Now, let's say we get our schedule for this term, and I see there it is, the dreaded college algebra. But you know what? I'm going to be optimistic, because why? Math is used in business, right? I'm going to get something out of this class. Let me go give this a shot. Let me be optimistic. I go in, take out my notebook, take out my iPad, whatever I'm going to take note with, and the professor will walk in. Now, this is a common problem that is usually thrown on the board. If peanuts sell for $2.71 a pound and cashews sell for $3.14 a pound, we want to obtain a mixture where we use 10 pounds of peanuts, and we want the total mixture to sell for $5 a pound. how many pounds of cashews must we use? Now, if you're the student, you're going to take a pause and say, what does this have to do with business? Okay? And most likely, you're going to do this. Almost every student and almost everybody who's taken a math class has done this and asked this question. Professor says, question, yes, by all means. When am I ever going to use this? Okay? The most common question in a math class. And most likely, you're going to get one of two responses from that professor. You're going to use this in a later class. We're building critical thinking skills. Now again, as the student, you're still saying, was I fully answered? Did that give me any drive to learn the material? Did that fully answer why I need to know this? And unfortunately, it's a no. And as professors, we're going to present complex equations on the board, so where is the drive and motivation to learn? So here's where the negative opinion starts. Students feeling that it's irrelevant of what they're learning. Okay, well, let's continue forward here. My philosophy as a professor, when I enter my classrooms, it's a little funny, but I love old boxing movies. And my philosophy is, I'm thinking of our class as I'm your coach, and we're training for a big championship fight. How does that even relate? Well, usually in these movies, you have some intense training scene, music, push-ups, someone's doing running. Some training that's so demanding that most of us can't survive. But why are athletes subjecting themselves to such training? They have the end goal, they have the drive to achieve that championship. In order to learn complex mathematics, we need that drive. Now, I once had a professor that taught me a great philosophy, and that was the power of abstract mathematics. He told me that if you understand abstract mathematics, you can dominate any field that you apply it to. Let's talk now about some abstract mathematics and maybe how we can change how people view math's worth and maybe get some excitement towards it. So let's start here with this problem. Let's look here at this image. Now, this is known as a topic in sequences and series. It's commonly taught in college level math classes. Now, unfortunately, when this topic is presented in the classic textbook way, it's also followed by all of these other equations that come along with it. And we just tell students, hey, learn this. You're going to need it one day. You're going to use it in a later class. And even worse, here's 50 to 100 homework problems on this assignment. Building critical thinking skills, right? I would imagine after doing that many homework problems, you would have some critical thinking skills. But what are they? Have we really answered the student's thirst of why I'm learning this? Now, let me flip the script on you. In my class, I don't start in the classic lecture format. I start with an image of a car dealership, as so. Now, what do we notice from this image? First off, the people are way too happy purchasing this car. Have you yourself, or do you know anybody that has been that happy when they sign the dotted line for thousands of dollars of loan? Why is it that we're not happy? Well, we're fed a paper with massive numbers on there, and somewhere along the line, we feel like we're being taken. Somewhere along the line, something is up. And on the other side, you have the salesman that says, got you a great deal. We were here for you. Were you really? Now, what if you were in my class and I told you that all of the equations that I just started with for sequences and series and the scary looking intimidating math, what if I told you those were used to derive the formula for your monthly car payment and mortgage payment? Would you be interested to learn now? Did I just create a drive? Now, we have a motivated student. And let me tell you, I had the most motivated students when I taught this subject in this way. I had never had such high test scores on this chapter's content. In fact, I looked at my exam and thought I wrote it too easy. But when I looked it over, it was one of the most difficult exams that I composed because I put word problems on there. And even worse than math, students hate word problems involving math. But they destroyed it because they had something to train for, something that motivated them. Now, here's where it even gets interesting to math educators. Students stayed after class to ask more questions. Students emailed me massive amounts of emails, more questions. How much should I put down for a car payment? How could I use this math more to save me money in the car dealership? We went from students wanting to run out of class to now staying after to ask for more math. Again, thinking of how we can change how we present the material can create a drive and motivation so we don't have a negative opinion of math. Let's have some more fun with this. Let's put this other image up here. And now this is typically a lesson known as exponentials and logarithms. I'm not going to teach it, but that's the title of it. And again, it looks intimidating. And the common textbook setup is, here's a bunch of formulas, here's a bunch of theorems, learn them. We're building critical thinking skills. Again, you have a student that says, why? All right. Funny story behind this actual lecture, when I was a young professor starting out, one of my first interviews as a part-time teacher, they said, hey, on exponentials and logarithms, tell us how you would make this lesson engaging to students. Well, here's what I did, and here's what I do now. In my class, I showed this image. Young gentleman, money flying around him. What does that have to do with exponents and logs? What if I told you that fully understanding this chapter would allow you to understand an equation to make you a millionaire in this course? Would you want to listen? I bet you yourself right now want to know this $1 million equation because it does exist. Again, I had engagement, and again, I had high success rates. Now, carrying this even further, we have many famous financial advisors that talk about a debt-free approach and using your money wisely to become a millionaire. In this course, I actually showed them the calculations of how to do so, of how buying the correct car and using that money towards an investment can make you a millionaire. I had students telling me how much they would have to invest and when they would become a millionaire. And believe me, they were excited for that math. And then they wanted more. Now imagine that we have math classes that use math to tell students how to get out of college debt-free, how to buy their first house or car so they're not in financial hardship, and how to invest properly so they can retire a millionaire. That sounds like a math course that I'm sure most people would want to take. And again, I had students asking more. I was bound by curriculum in my math classes, but I couldn't leave a hungry student, especially when I actually got them asking for more math. So what is it that I did? Okay, let me talk to my college, let me talk to my campus. I want to hold financial math literacy workshops for anybody who's interested. We did so, did them over Zoom. This was during the COVID era, but I said, hey, send out an email, whoever wants to come, we'll talk about math and finance. And I thought maybe I would have 20 to 30 students, typical class size. The morning of the event, the organizer emails me, hey, you got 100 people or more than 100 people showing up possibly. Be ready. Now, during the COVID era, I was famously known for wearing a polo or dress shirt and gym shorts. That was not going to fly on a day like this. So I had to prep myself for all these people coming. And I had never lectured, first off, to a class that size or a Zoom session that size. And we did. We had over 100 people show up because they wanted to see how math was applied. Now, we could teach math in this manner, or we can go back and teach cashews and peanuts. Where do we get the student interest? Now, one last fun example I want to talk about here. You might be saying, if you're a scientist, okay, you're telling me the secret to making math fun is finance. I'm a scientist. I got one for you guys as well. Now, let's look at these equations here. These are related to population dynamics. Classic examples in population dynamics involve calculate the US population in 2030. How fast is bacteria growing? All good examples. Now, when I do this lesson, students walk in, I'll put up this slide as the beginning of the day. It says the end of the world. And I have all the students looking up. What do you mean the end of the world? I'm going to tell you how math is going to predict the end of the world today. What? Excuse me? Okay. Little dramatic, but I have their attention. So why is it that I use this slide? Well, where does population dynamics matter? The Earth only has a limited amount of resources. We only have so much fossil fuel. We only have so much food. And the Earth can only sustain a limited population. Now students want to know, okay, how do we use these equations to understand this? And during the course of this chapter, we study data and find out, when are we going to run out of fossil fuel? When is food going to become a problem? Now, here's the interesting thing. I have students that'll not only stay after class to ask more questions, but I've had students to say, you know what, I want to be an electrical engineer now. I want to work in alternative energy to solve this fossil fuel problem. I want to work in a field that helps this food shortage problem. We went from having students wanting to run from a math class to staying after to ask questions to now changing their major to one that involves math. Again, just by changing the way that we present it. We could do this, or we could still stick with the old adage of mixing cashews and peanuts. Now, how does this define the future? And where do we carry lessons like this? We as mathematicians talk all the time about the beauty of math and that there's patterns. Math is about learning patterns, and we have a passion for that. Why not use that passion in a manner that engages students to want to know more? We might say that we're bound by curriculum. I can only do so much what that textbook tells me. I can only teach what the curriculum is. But here's the thing that we got to realize as math educators, professors, and as mathematicians. Yes, we have knowledge in here, but we also got math in our hearts. And that should be portrayed in our lectures. We can create content, examples, maybe even change and write our own textbooks to give students a drive, to set up the stage. What is that fight that they're going for to make them want to learn? And I'm not saying adjust curriculum. By all means, we can still teach the curriculum that we have to. I'm not saying even make it easier to make math fun. In fact, I made my curriculum harder by putting word problems. But once you have the drive, and once the students know you're there with them, they'll train. They'll want to know math. So where is it that we carry this forward? As professors, as math educators, let's get rid of these two answers. You're going to use this one day, or we're building critical thinking skills. Let's never tell a student that again. Let's also finally put to rest, when am I ever going to use this? And more importantly, let's leave those peanuts and cashews where they belong, in the past. Thank you.
Imagine a future where we are producing innovative technology with cybersecurity in mind that helps us to protect and defend ourselves, our schools, hospitals, companies, government, and our infrastructure that we rely on daily. The key word there is innovative or innovation. Innovation requires outside-the-box thinking, and one of the most critical factors that drives innovation is diversity. America is currently under cyber attack. Now let that sink in. America is currently under cyber attack. When I say America, I'm speaking about you and me, about companies, agencies, schools, hospitals, our government, and our critical infrastructure, which includes water, food, energy, transportation, communication, and public health. To add a numerical value to that statement, I'd like to share with you the FBI's most recent internet crime report. In 2020, there were 791,790 internet crime complaints, with a loss exceeding 4.1 billion. On average, there were more than 2,000 cyber attacks a day in 2020. I love sharing facts like these, in spite of how scary they sound, because knowledge is power, and the more we know and are aware of, the greater difference we can make. There's another important factor here, and that is currently there's a huge diversity gap in cybersecurity. Although agencies are aware of this gap and trying to address the issue, it is not enough. Because how can agencies fix the gap and recruit what's not there to recruit? For this answer, I look to the collegiate level, to diversity among populations such as here at CSUSB, where the total student population is 19,404 students. 63% of all students are female. 88% of all students come from a non-white background, and 87% of CSUSB students come from the San Bernardino and Riverside counties. These stats show how diverse we are and are definitely a cause for celebration. We also have two amazing scholarship programs here at CSUSB, specifically in cybersecurity. The National Science Foundation CyberCorps Scholarship for Service and the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Scholarship Program are both amazing opportunities to learn and develop your knowledge about cybersecurity, receive a full paid tuition, and additional support income to allow you to focus on your studies while developing your skills. And once you graduate, you go on to work in the public sector to help battle against those cyber attacks and work with the technology of today to help develop the technology of tomorrow. Sounds like the perfect solution to the diversity gap in cybersecurity, right? Well, there's a catch. I can speak to how amazing that the scholarship is because I'm a recipient of the National Science Foundation Scholarship for Service, but through my research, what I found alarming is that last year, only 14% of applicants were female. And thus far, this year is 0%. And the average percentage of non-white applicants is in the low 40% range. The diversity gap in cybersecurity is here at CSUSB too. When comparing the CSUSB stats to those of the scholarship program, I had to research to see what is causing these discrepancies. And what I found is that those from non-white backgrounds, such as myself, and females of any background all had these roadblocks that they needed or still need to overcome just to apply. The number one roadblock was some sort of self-doubt. Of the women I interviewed, 100% felt self-doubt as well as the feeling that they were looked at differently or doubted by others when mentioning they were in cybersecurity. The number two roadblock we all shared in the feeling of inadequacy, of not feeling good enough or technical enough. And finally, the number three roadblock, imposter syndrome, or the feeling of doubting your abilities to the point where you feel like a fraud or imposter. All of these roadblocks and misconceptions heavily contribute to the discrepancy between the demographics of the school and the applicants of these scholarships. We must all face and battle with these internal roadblocks. Remember I said earlier that knowledge is power, and the more we know, the greater difference we can make? Well, just being aware of these roadblocks is the first step to combating them. From my personal experience, being a first-generation college student from a Mexican and Spanish heritage, I can tell you firsthand about those feelings of self-doubt, the feelings of not belonging in college, let alone in a cybersecurity scholarship program. Even after receiving the National Science Foundation Scholarship for Service, I doubted myself, and if anything, being a recipient only amplified the imposter syndrome and the feeling of not being technical enough. Being in the scholarship program brought on a self-imposed expectation that I must know everything there is to know about cybersecurity. Otherwise, how could I be qualified to receive the scholarship? What has honestly helped me push these roadblocks aside was saying yes to any opportunities that come my way. My first introduction to CSUSB was through a summer scholar experience in cybersecurity. I applied for it on a lark after seeing an email for it. Once I was accepted to the summer scholar experience, I became more open to applying or signing up for activities and clubs. It was through the summer scholar experience that I became a member of the cybersecurity club on campus. And now, 4 years later, while in my graduate program, I am the president of the club. Being a part of clubs and volunteering for events gave me the space to fail and be okay with failing. So now, even when it seems daunting to apply for jobs, I know I have all this experience, and that is reassuring in the face of self-doubt. In the end, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you believe becomes your reality. But the actual reality is, our standards for success are distorted, and they do not match that of the industry. Companies and agencies will train you, and the ideal candidate is the one that is passionate about the field and willing to learn. The future of cybersecurity is dependent on meeting the need for innovating professionals to work in the field. Particularly here at CSUSB, minorities have the numbers to fill this need. Moreover, the diversity of backgrounds is key for the innovative thought that cybersecurity requires. CSUSB is designated as a center of academic excellence in cyber defense by the National Security Agency and the Department of Homeland Security. CSUSB has the perfect environment and tools to systematically improve the levels of diversity in the field of cybersecurity, which is crucial for our future success. The opportunities are there, and all that it requires is that you set aside any self-doubt and just go for it. Be confident in knowing that you've made it this far, in spite of all odds, and use that to reach out for those opportunities. In closing, I want to remind you again that knowledge is power, and we have the power and diversity to innovate, secure, and define our future.
Cesar Chavez, Malala Yousafzai, Janet Mock, Jose Sarria, Bayard Rustin. An attribute these wonderful humans have in common is perseverance. Their ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and systems designed to oppress them is inspiring. Despite having the odds stacked against them, these influential people demonstrate that perseverance pays off. There's a great deal we can learn from them: the awareness of their self-worth, the application of their innate abilities, and their level of self-love. You see, self-love is essential to perseverance, and in my experience, their journey begins with self-acceptance. Growing up as a gay person in a religious household meant that my journey involved a lot of unlearning. I first had to unlearn what I was conditioned to believe about myself before I could accept myself completely. In the words of James Baldwin, it took many years of vomiting up all the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on the earth as though I had a right to be here. To achieve self-love, I had to accept every aspect of myself, from my stature to the space between my teeth. Only after self-acceptance was I able to internalize and understand the value of my personal happiness and peace of mind. I encourage you to do the same. Embrace your uniqueness because you're exactly who you're meant to be. Your journey is uniquely yours, and giving up in light of adversity is not an option. Stay the course and you'll experience that perseverance pays off. When you attain self-love, your aspirations become non-negotiable, and it's the desire to fulfill your dreams and live your life by your standards that will fuel your perseverance. Self-love is a radical act in a society that prioritizes status, finances, and fame above all else. But your greatness lies on the other side of this radical act, because life starts after self-love, and the time to begin was yesterday. Another important aspect of building perseverance is being prepared, because put simply, luck favors the prepared. When you are intentional about the environments you put yourself in, you gain exposure to skills, habits, and resources that amplify and refine your innate abilities. In my search for a mentor, I attended the Circle of Change Leadership Conference, which is designed to put college students in the same room as recruiters from companies like Disney, Coca-Cola, and CBS. I attended the conference with the intention of meeting a mentor, and I was successful. By being intentional about my actions and putting myself in an ideal environment, I increased the likelihood of making the connection I was seeking. 4 years later, I'm the co-executive producer of Dr. Anita Polite Wilson's visual podcasts, and she's a regular contributor on my podcast for the leadership and professional development of first-generation students called LPDcast. After years of working together, I'm grateful and proud to call her my friend. This leads us to the final aspect of perseverance that I'm going to share with you all today, which is, you have what it takes. Everything you need to persevere already dwells within you. Your goals, your happiness, your ability to overcome is inherent in who you are, and it's demonstrated through your resiliency and your ability to adapt. You have what it takes to fulfill your goals and aspirations. You hold the cards. You make the moves. Through self-love and by being intentional about your choices, you'll refine your innate abilities and learn to persevere through every obstacle you encounter. I believe you can do it. I know you can. And during moments of difficulty, I encourage you to always remember that giving up on yourself is not an option, because perseverance pays off. Thank you.
Finding a parking spot on college campus can be frustrating. Not to mention, it may lead to traffic congestion, class delays, and accidents. To alleviate this challenge, a group of computer engineering students worked on equipping parking lots with smart parking systems at Cal State San Bernardino. In this talk, I'll present our system that integrates IoT sensors and civilian cameras to count vehicles at a parking structure. While various parking systems have been deployed, the central problem is how to make the trade-off between cost, accuracy, and reliability. Smart parking system can be divided into 3 categories. The first one is sensor-based method, which use stationary sensors to detect a vehicle's presence by sensing ultrasonic, optical, magnetism, or pressure changes. You might have noticed the black circles and squares on the road near intersections. They are so-called inductive loops. When the vehicle passes over, the car's mental body reduces the inductance of the wire loop. This change tells the sensor about the presence of the vehicle. At intersections, this information will then be used to adjust the signal timing. The same type of sensor has been used to monitor parking lots. The second method for counting vehicle is by using cameras. This picture shows the license plate reader from a nearby toll road. In camera-based method, computer vision techniques are used to extract vehicles' movement from the camera footage. For plate reader, it required an array of specialized high-speed cameras. If it's just for counting vehicles, a consumer-grade camera can work reasonably well. The last common method for parking monitor is what we call crowdsourcing. In popular navigation apps, you've seen the popular time graph or similar functions. It relies on the users voluntarily sharing their parking location information from their smartphone. The more people that are using the app, the more accurate the estimation will be. Each of these methods have some limitations when it comes to tracking the number of vehicles coming in and going out of a parking lot. For sensor-based method, it is hard to distinguish between 2 vehicles traveling closely together versus 1 slow-moving vehicle. For camera-based method, it's challenging to maintain a clear line of sight at all times, especially in outdoor environment. Additionally, driving behavior, such as the aggressive and illegal ones in parking lots, can easily confuse computer vision algorithm. As to crowdsourcing method, the performance heavily relies on the adoption rate of the smartphone app. So crowdsourcing are mainly used for a rough estimation of the parking lot occupancy. Given these observations, we built a smart parking system by integrating both sensor-based and camera-based methods. We installed new IoT sensors at the entrances and utilized existing civilian cameras inside the parking structure. The pilot side of the system is a parking structure with 745 parking spots. Here's a closer look at the sensor we used. It's a battery-powered magnetoresistive sensing device. They are installed in holes cored in the pavement and are covered with epoxy. This picture was taken when we put them in. Different from the traditional inductive loops, no wiring is required for this sensor. Vehicle detection data are wirelessly transmitted using IEEE 802.15.4 protocol. This picture on the left shows how we install the access point. It is similar to the household Wi-Fi antenna. The detection data is further relayed to the IT service room inside the parking structure. From there, the detection data is sent to our cloud server. Our system consists of 3 parts: wireless vehicle detector, civilian cameras, and a web server. This floor plan shows the setup at one of the entrances. There's 1 camera pointing to the entrance. The camera was installed by the campus police to monitor security before this project. 2 sensors were installed under each lane leading towards the parking structure. Now we're looking from the civilian camera's perspective. Our vehicle tracking algorithm processed the live video footage. The boundary box shows the location of the vehicle extracted from the background. By tracking the center of the boundary box, we can find if the vehicle is entering or leaving the parking structure. For the IoT sensors, they are triggered when the vehicle are on top of them. Integrating two sensing methods, it allows us to achieve good accuracy. In our test, the vehicle counting accuracy is about 96%. Our initial plan was to develop the smart parking system in 2 steps. In the first year, we'll conduct a pilot study at 1 parking lot. Then in the second year, we'll expand the system to cover most of the campus. Unfortunately, the second step of the project is currently on hold due to the COVID-19 interruptions. So in the last few months, we looked into data collected by the pilot system. We're interested in how to provide parking prediction and studied traffic patterns. The intuition behind parking prediction is simple. We can estimate parking occupancy in the next 15 or 30 minutes based on historical data. This figure was taken from our website. It shows the traffic pattern is similar between 2 days in different weeks. We can further improve our estimation by looking at daily and weekly traffic patterns. When we turn to data analysis, we have some interesting findings. Our parking structure has 2 entrances. This figure shows the hourly count of detected vehicles by each lane from the 2 entrances. Each entrance has 2 lanes, one for enter and one for exit. It's interesting to note the west entrance receives more traffic than the other entrance. In this figure, the count in blue is significantly larger than the count in gray. This is likely because the west entrance is closer to other parking lots and major lecture buildings, which makes students consider west entrance as the default entrance to the parking structure. Our study finds it will be beneficial to add a parking direction at the east entrance. This would help to improve traffic flow by balancing the use of both entrances and may reduce congestion during rush hours. We also looked into weekly traffic patterns. It may provide insight on long-term traffic trends. Well, the last spring and winter quarters are unconventional. We can see how wildfire-induced power outage and the COVID-19 pandemic affected the university. Generally speaking, we can use the traffic pattern to study students' movement behavior. This in turn can help to improve class schedule, campus traffic management, and plan for emergency response. For future work, there are a total of 7,300 parking spaces on campus, while the pilot system only covers 10% of them. We hope to expand the system to include more parking lots. Our ultimate goal is to provide parking guidance. That is, suggest parking location based on parking lot's occupancy information so that we can direct the campus traffic. So far, our students deployed the pilot system and designed a parking prediction algorithm. All of these are student projects with many support from the university. In the computer science department, our objective has been providing students with hands-on experience, solving real-world problems, and to better prepare them with a data-driven mindset. And with that, that's how we define the future.
According to current data from InsideHigherEd.com, if you were to ask a decent number of randomly chosen professors on this campus whether they believe that in-person learning is superior to online learning, over half of them would say yes. If you asked me the same question, I would answer, I'm not so sure anymore. I used to be convinced that nothing could replace the traditional college classroom experience. Now I am convinced that the shift to online learning was necessary. In fact, I propose that online learning actually equalizes students and discourages bad teaching. I propose furthermore that in order to remain relevant, colleges and universities will need to define a future in which online learning is the norm. Even in a post-pandemic world, students will continue to want to learn more efficiently and on their own schedules. Before the pandemic struck, I was driving 1.5 hours each way for a total of 6 hours every week to teach my French 1 class at San Bernardino Valley College. Then, in early March, everything changed. At the very beginning, no one in San Bernardino had been affected by COVID, so I drove out here to give the midterm. I didn't know that this would be the last time that I would see my students in the classroom. At first, I wasn't sure how I wanted to handle the shift. I worried because I would no longer be able to write out sentences on the board. Further, I worried that students wouldn't have the same opportunities to practice speaking. But after a few initial hiccups, I noticed some interesting changes. I began to feel that I knew the students almost better than I did in the classroom because I started to view them as individuals inhabiting their own separate spaces. I knew that despite everything that was going on in the world and in their lives, they were still making the effort to stay involved with the class. That fact alone was meaningful to me. I also noticed many of my students trying harder, and I think that maybe because they couldn't hide as well in an online environment, everyone had to participate. No one could whisper in the back of the classroom or disrupt the class with loud conversations. One day, I decided to play Jeopardy with my class. Once they had the answer, they simply had to type it into the chat box. I noticed that one student in particular was superior to all of the others at my Jeopardy game, but he wasn't someone who normally participated in class. I realized that the online medium had given him the opportunity to demonstrate his skills in a way that he would not have been able to otherwise. As a result, I became aware that he was an A student, whereas in a normal classroom, I might have overlooked him. Overall, the transition has been a positive experience for me. I am now able to teach my class from the comfort of my own home. I'm not wasting money on gas or losing my sanity after hours and hours on the road. So, why do many professors and administrators still balk at the idea of a future in which learning does not have to take place on college campuses? We have this overly romantic notion of what the traditional college experience should look like. I was lucky in the sense that I had the opportunity to have this experience. I attended Barnard College in New York City. Most of the professors were spectacular, and I received a good deal of individualized attention. I cannot deny that there was something special about engaging in lively discussions about Shakespeare over a seminar table. But many other aspects of my experience were not so positive. I had to sit in the back of large lecture halls, eat at the school cafeteria, and participate in communal showers. These were the aspects of college life that I did not enjoy, so much so that I studied abroad as a junior and moved off campus as a senior. Other students may have thrived when surrounded by friends and classmates at all times, but I needed some solitude. Though college administrators would like us to think otherwise, there is no getting around the fact that the traditional college experience is becoming obsolete in today's post-pandemic world. Most traditional colleges don't care if the move online has been advantageous to students. These institutions are facing political pressures to reopen, and their main concern right now is to recover the financial losses that they endured when students were forced off campuses. Quite simply, they will do whatever they can to bring students back at whatever cost. They don't bother to ask the students what they want, or to stop and consider whether higher education's entire business model is now antiquated. I am not arguing that socializing is an important aspect of the college experience. Of course it is. But we should allow students to choose how they want to attend class. Why? Because then those lively seminar discussions will finally be open to students who might not be lucky enough to have wealthy parents. As more and more teaching shifts online, professors will be forced to revamp their style to meet the needs of students, and those who refuse will be left behind. These are all steps in the right direction, because if we aren't teaching for the benefit of students, what exactly are we doing?
My life is a colorful storybook filled with trials and successes. my life has not been simple. I am a first-generation college student and the child of immigrants. I took the chance to go into higher education, and little did I know that this once shy girl would serve as the student body president and the CEO of the Associated Students Incorporated, our student government at Cal State San Bernardino. My parents are from Colima, Mexico, specifically Cuauhtemoc and Buena Vista. And both sides of my family in Mexico participate in local government. I swore to myself as a young child that I would not do that, because being a woman, specifically my ethnic background, it's difficult serving folks outside of your values and morals. Now I serve, and every decision that is made on this campus, I am a part of that decision-making process. I've redefined what it means to be a student leader. I serve all. Student leaders, we don't have a guide to lead, and leaders in general. There are so many leadership styles. I lead with my heart, my soul, and what my values and morals tell me to do. I would never say yes to something that I morally couldn't do that would hurt my constituents, even if it's just one student. I wasn't exposed to that kind of leadership where every single thing, every single deed, every single initiative, everything that you do goes back to what you believe in. And that's how you lead. And I thought to myself, am I going at this radical because I care and really love our students? I called my executive director, Dr. Jesse Felix, asking him what that is. And he responds with, that is congruent leadership. And I said, huh? He responds with, yeah, leading with love, leading from your heart. Every single task, everything that you do goes back to your values and your morals. I honor my constituents every day by leading with love. Now, how did I do that? I took that and I ran. You see, I changed how this university views student government for years to come. For example, grading policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. I analyzed my constituents' cultural and economic background, and we worked towards creating an institutional credit no credit system that would stay until we were back in in-person teaching. This benefited not everyone at our campus, but it helped a lot of our students needing help. Many times I was in uncomfortable situations because many disagreed with my stances and the way I went about things. You have to keep pushing when it's from your heart. Leaders, great leaders, say the truth with no fear. You have to be fearless, especially when it comes to students. I ran so far with utilizing congruent leadership, I went as far as giving back the students their money back in grants, funding student employment, meaningful endowments, gifts, intentional speakers, speaking on critical race theory and activism, and the list goes on. Nowadays, student governments are stuck, and all we do is host events without intention and not reading what our constituents need. You can't compare your leadership or your corporation. Giving your constituents the quality experience they deserve is what we need to do better. In my heart, I could not do the stereotypical student government events with virtual concerts and events promoting the college experience. Students are dying, burnt out, homeless, battling mental illness, afraid of law enforcement. I could not spend student dollars on events that are stereotypical. This year, I questioned every move I made. Are we serving enough? Is our staff comfortable with their pay so they can help our students? How are our students? What are we not saying? Lead with intention. Every action has to be with intention. I did not fall into the need to pass resolutions so often. And I promised myself after I passed a resolution that had no intention, I would not pass a resolution that had no meaning. I would not pass a piece of paper with no action. I would not send a letter to my constituents with no action. And I'm going to quote a very important person, our Dean of Students on this campus, Dr. Daria Graham. A resolution without action is essentially a weapon. And I took that quote of what Dr. Daria Graham and I really ran again with it. Leading with intention and leading without being performative are keys to promoting a healthy environment. As a leader, we strive to provide a great environment. And in my role, I gave our team that you lead from your heart and advocate to implement change. My thought process when creating change was no one is going to care about me when I graduate. No one is going to remember who I am when I finish my term. I can be as transparent as possible because there are no consequences. I told myself I'm going to make them remember who I am because I'm going to change how folks talk to students. I'm going to change how policies go about. Even if it affects one student, we change it. Serving my constituents, I tailored my role to them and acknowledging the resilience my constituents have. I will not fail to recognize and note that COVID-19 is still well and alive. Thousands of students have lost their job. Family members have passed away. Students are homeless. Students are surviving sexual assault, domestic violence. Students are food insecure. The list goes on and on. These issues arise and students are left with thoughts of, should I graduate? Should I continue? I can graduate in a year. Or should I take this gap year and potentially lose my financial aid so I can be okay mentally? And we have students going back into their households after dorming on campus for years. I'm one of those students, and I can speak from personal experience that going back into a household when I lived alone for 3 years is incredibly difficult on your mental health, especially having strict traditional immigrant parents. These institutions were not built for me. These institutions were made for white males, not made for women and those of different ethnic backgrounds. We need to mention intersectionality, a term that means how racism, sexism, and classism combine in experiences of underrepresented groups. This term was introduced by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. Although white women were allowed to go to school and did struggle, we need to look deeper in the intersectionality of higher ed. Black, Indigenous people of color, women specifically, struggled in higher education so we can thrive. As a leader, you all need to recognize and be a part of the discussion and be about diversity, equity, and appreciation, not just your own culture. Emerge and learn about different cultures. Always recognize those who have been historically underrepresented. Create scholarships, awards, moments of recognition, and every task and goal you keep in mind of those folks. I run with no filter and no fear, and I acknowledge that this institution was not built for me. Black, Indigenous people of color, women of different ethnic backgrounds who come from underrepresented communities, we are pleading for help. But higher ed institutions are built to oppress women's needs, beginning with academics. I suffer from reproductive issues, and I fainted in class because I wasn't allowed to go to the restroom during an exam. The system failed me that day, and it has failed many women. Going into leadership with my lived experiences has taught me that we need to start radicalizing higher education, beginning from the system, administration, faculty, staff, and students. Radicalizing higher education is interpreted differently by many, but to me it's creating representation, more faculty and staff that look like the students that they are serving. In my entire academic career, beginning from preschool, I have had 2 Latinx teachers. That's unacceptable. Radicalizing higher ed is being student-centered. And I'm talking about policies, infrastructure, the food on campus. Let students make the decisions. Leaders in higher ed use congruent leadership in higher education. Leaders everywhere, use it and let your constituents be a part of the process. Have folks lead with love and their heart, not for a title, but because you care. With these new ideas and new styles of leadership, there are trials of being a leader. You lose friends, your views change so rapidly, and what you once felt so strongly about, you see in a different lens. As a student, that was very difficult for me. Being a leader is lonely. Being at the top is lonely. My partner tells me that he should be hired because I take work home. Being a leader, you will take work home with you. It's okay to take it home, especially that we are virtual. Our desk is our work, our school, and for me, it's also my makeup vanity. It's how you manage it. Taking it home is cautiously okay. And yes, it's okay to think about and decompress, but get the work done tomorrow. As leaders, we want to fix things now, and it's mentally exhausting, but we cannot serve and honor our constituents if we're not in the right headspace to take care of our own selves. For me, this was not a resume builder or a guaranteed spot at a grad program or a guaranteed job after. This is my life. I started out as an activist on campus fighting for student rights. Being an activist while being a leader is heartbreaking because you're not understood anymore. I have to say that being a leader broke me and made me not as academically driven as I once was. However, it showed me what my true passion and calling was, and that's to lead. My life trials I have faced as a person and in my undergraduate career should have made me drop out. However, it has led me to the highest leadership position I can as a student. I have worked in many areas of this university. I've observed for years the different leadership styles, leaders practice, watching non-student oriented leaders lead our campus and watch them stay, as well as those who practice congruent leadership and watching them leave to top institutions and thrive. Students are the reason we continue to function as an institution. It's only fitting for a student to have discussed the importance of congruent leadership because congruent leadership in higher education must be student-centered. Student leaders and anyone in a position of power who rose to leadership during the COVID-19, for most of us, it wasn't a choice. We followed our hearts because our constituents needed us. And that's where we are today. If there's one thing you take away today, please let it be. Lead with your heart, creating good change, impactful change. Us as leaders, we hold so much privilege. It's up to us to truly honor our constituents and make the decisions based on them, but also be mindful of your own self so you can lay in bed knowing that you did everything you can. Love yourself because you are defining your future. Thank you.
Today I want to talk to you about your health. And being a nurse for a few years now, this is not surprising. Yet if I said I want to talk to you about your digital health, then that might be. That would be because most people don't mention digital health, don't even know what it is. Yet your health and your digital health are one and the same. Think about why. Guy comes into the emergency room confused after hitting his head in an auto accident, and he lands in an urgent care and isn't really able to say much. Can we pull up his medical record where his data is? A few miles from home in the emergency room, same question. Can we pull up his medical record? Several states away on vacation, probably not. So where's the data? And how effective is our treatment likely to be? As it stands, should he come to consciousness even for a while, we're limited to a very compromised self-report of medical history at best, or a history not at all at worst. According to the World Health Organization, digital health is a broad umbrella term encompassing e-health, as well as emerging areas such as the use of advanced computing sciences in big data, genomics, and artificial intelligence. Digital health constituted the primary means for care delivery, and changing to digital health venues happened overnight during the COVID-19 pandemic. And when we say big data, it means that healthcare providers now work from huge databases of tens of thousands, millions, even billions of data pieces, which require new methods of analysis in artificial intelligence and machine learning. In that glut of data is your individual health data, often compared to a benchmark of data from many, many others who have a similar condition, diagnosis, or other things in common like molecular structure. Each time we log into the healthcare provider sites, have an encounter with the provider, or send and receive messages with them, data is generated. Looking just at frequencies and looking at what's happened over the past year or so, since the outbreak of COVID-19, the use of digital health services has soared, especially in the United Kingdom and the United States. Some caveats. The UK National Health Service, NHS, experienced a 912% increase in the use of their app NHS Digital in 2020. The novel UK messaging tool, NHS Mail, generated over 100 billion chat messages to its users and hosted over 24 million meetings. Similar striking rises in telehealth visits occurred in the US, with a 154% increase found when comparing two periods early in 2019 and 2020. Remember, telehealth and its related tools like chatbots and RPM, remote patient monitoring, are not just about convenience, it's about the data. So in trying to look back and say what really happened, it's hard to summarize, but the Chief Operating Officer of HIMSS, the Health Information Management Systems Society, said it best. He said, in this pandemic, we pretty much had to blow up the classic encounter-based paradigm of health. We had to create a situation where clinicians, physicians, and nurse practitioners could, in fact, talk to people not inside the walls of the clinic, but to accelerate areas of telehealth and digital health communications. And we had to do so quickly. And that, frankly, is not the forte of the healthcare ecosystem. It doesn't move quickly, and this time we had to. So the benefits of digital health are many. Reduced costs, reduced inefficiencies, improved access, better quality, more personalized or precise diagnostic and treatment encounters, at least according to the FDA. Digital health technologies, chiefly telehealth services, accessed through smart devices, often involve streaming media, video conferencing, wireless communication, yet much more than a one-for-one replacement of a traditional face-to-face interaction. Telehealth sessions carry with them other advantages, such as additional touch points of care and additional data points, which strengthen patient engagement, consumer choice, and algorithm training and validation for disease management. So it's this convergence of technology and care provision that fit together now, kind of like fist and glove. And they really are inseparable. And you thought the old idea and term doc in the box was about convenience. It was, it is, and now it's about much, much more. Every time we dial into the healthcare provider, your doctor, your nurse practitioner, data is organized into a final form called actionable data. Data about the patient, so the self-report, the HPI, that's the history of the present illness, signs and symptoms, advice, a prescription, but it's about much, much more now. The data too is about the encounter itself. How long did it take? Is this a repeat visit? Was video instruction offered? So what does machine learning in healthcare really look like? Machine learning and natural language processing in healthcare on Data Science Central's blog, it's the image of what's going on behind the scenes in the brain, if you will, of the healthcare system, or the hospital, or the outpatient clinic, or the doctor's office. The nurse and doctor are there, I promise you. Look at all the data in the picture on the left. The EMR, electronic medical record, has data, images, lab results, everything from your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, numbers. So structured data. Also clinical notes, so a narrative on, it's a lot of data for even just one patient, times all the patients hospitalized everywhere over time. And this is indeed big data, also known as humongous data. Well, how does one make sense of it? Well, one doesn't. One nurse or doctor needs help from machine learning. On the right, we see an image of a neural network. Note the second column shows what's being searched for by computer algorithms, hidden patterns. Things we providers aren't even looking for, don't ask about, don't know to look for. So here's a friendlier picture, if you will, of data analytics techniques experts use to analyze that wealth of humongous data. So for professors and students out there, anywhere, traditional science and hypothesis testing, represented by that blue circle called statistics, is now supplemented in clinical decision making through data analytics methods. Some are referred to here collectively under KDD, knowledge discovery and databases. Some specific analytic techniques under that are neural networks, including pattern recognition, nearest neighbor, SVM or support vector machine, decision trees, and random forest. The volume of data alone is a reason traditional statistics is not enough for the analysis of big data, as it's called, but there are other reasons as well, like the velocity or the speed at which the healthcare data comes at us. Another is the variety of places the big data in healthcare comes from, including administrative record like one's zip code or occupation. Pattern recognition is an important feature of machine learning in healthcare. Recently, researchers learned that remnants of the RNA of the coronavirus is shed in the gastrointestinal system, so that sewage data will show early signs of the presence of COVID in a community as much as 7 to 10 days prior to an actual outbreak. So there's a pattern brought to us by machine learning, again, one that we were not looking for. So where is the provider in all of this? Providers, that's physicians and nurses, are not going to be replaced by machine learning, but helped by their proper use. So as a provider, I don't need to know intimately all the techniques I just rattled off, but I do need to know that those things are running behind the scenes in the electronic healthcare system in order to support clinical decisions, and that these analytic tools are something that is worthy of my trust. So here's another name now for COVID-19, and interestingly, the great accelerator of digital health. Every aspect of digital delivery of care, digital interaction in care encounters, digital this, digital that, has all changed and there's no going back. COVID-19 has catapulted the world's healthcare provision into an exponential change, the meteoric rise of digital health, so you must become an or electronic patient as the dominant mode, not the only mode, but the dominant mode of healthcare delivery. We know people are afraid. Where's my data going? Where the day is coming, in fact, that maybe I can only do this digitally. So today, though, we can selectively share, including with healthcare providers. We can also use password managers to keep things safe, double authentication when accessing care digitally, and I can secure my own wireless networks, both at home and in the workplace. And those things keep me safe. For doctors, patients, and engagement, there's no going back to the old way, not exclusively anyhow. It's not the first way to do business either, although the doctor's offices, nurse practitioners' offices, They'll continue to be full, at least in the short run. Many of us will engage digitally, almost on demand, whenever we are, wherever we are, and whenever there's a device available to us. There's no going back to the old days where once or twice yearly doctor's office visit is the norm. It was doctor-centric, it kept the insurance companies happy, sort of. It was about not necessarily the patient consumer. It also had waiting times that were long, paper, missed appointments. It was reactive and the patient was passive. It was all packed in. Today a scribe helps with that, but it was very hurried. And in my experience, it was never really about the TV doctor like on ER, Grey's Anatomy, Marcus Welby, or any of the TV doctors. The technology is already there to notify us that there is a doctor available to see us when we have placed our appointment desire in a window of time. There are accommodating, meaning safe, HIPAA or healthcare privacy laws and apps that go with, like Spruce, which I've used myself. So we are or will become e-patients, all of us. For digital health, look at this humorous picture of which way are you going. You have to ask yourself, which kind of e-patient are you? Friend of mine, no names, goes to her doctor and plunks down a piece of hardware. What's inside? Blood sugars. The retrieval and archiving of health information is in something hardware. It's not connected to much of anything. But in the picture on the right, Mr. Murphy can find his way to swat at the games he likes with his paws. Well, not quite really. He seems knowledgeable. You are needed to move from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So I want you to ask yourself, which way are you going? Our healthcare system moves from one which values transaction to one which embraces interaction. Nurses and physicians will need to reimagine their contribution, moving beyond caregiver to innovator, technologist, and advocate as well. But the advocacy really begins with you. So there's a few things wrong with this picture that kind of are addressed in the next one. And that is how all this data for you as an individual might work. The data is about you and precisely you and can be gathered rapidly and in real time, but not with hardware and not with paper. Feeding into the system with rapid, if not instantaneous, results and medical actions. Also, patients are coming to doctors with everything from a DNA report to output from wearables like EKG tracings, patterns with gait and posture. And this is what we call precision medicine. In 45 years of nursing, and if it's taught me nothing else, it's this. We talk a lot about highly individualized care, yet cohort medicine and strata medicine is still being practiced. Your data and treatment should not be about data and samples of 50 guys with heart failure who are not like you, 100 women who gave birth last year at the local hospital who are not like you, or cohorts or strata of samples of people who may or may not be like you. Strata or cohort medicine, one disease entity, people sometimes share molecular signatures and we should be grouped that way instead of by disease or by diagnosis or ICD-10 codes. So this old way is what we mean by one size fits all, and I call it one size fits no one medicine. I want you to know the power's in your hands. Remember, your device is your decision, and to be an e-patient and fully engaged, it's your decision, your device, and your data. With these digital venues comes real engagement, and that is the customer's future proactive relationship with healthcare providers as an e-patient. The Precision Medicine Project from the NIH, the National Institute of Health, is called All of Us. The goal is to enroll over 1 million people living in the United States, and that those enrollees truly represent the entire population of the United States. It will be the largest project of its kind ever, and currently has over 350,000 participants, with the objective to improve care, diagnosis, and treatment for everyone, based on individual data, takes into account your environment where you live, lifestyle, what you do, and your family health history and genetic makeup. So go to the All of Us site and sign up. Not only do you get to contribute to the largest of its kind ever individual care study, you get your own data back. So this is under the heading of things you also can do on a larger level, societal level. You can advocate for broadband internet access for everyone. Advocating for internet services as the fourth utility, and that means along with electricity, water, and gas, internet access, according to visionaries, has long been called the fourth utility. The FCC has recently provided an interactive mapping tool. The Mapping Broadband Health in America site to be used by local, state, and national planners to overlay and evaluate the intersection of health and broadband data. There are more things to watch for. The Biden administration is expected to prioritize health information and technology, including encouraging healthy exceptions to the information blocking rules as identified in the 21st Century Cures Act. We hope this means more interoperability to save our friend with the motor vehicle accident, NER, or it means more patient-centered exchange between environments of care. To assist in this respect, we hope to someday see an NPI, a National Patient Identifier. The algorithmic justice information, there is an organization committed to uncovering racial and gender bias in AI and popularized in the documentary Coded Bias. The Algorithmic Justice League harnesses people's stories of personal unfairness experienced by unjust algorithms, be they from endeavors of hiring, matters of forensics, or provision of medical care. Partnering with organizations of profile like TED, like Bloomberg, like Business Times, and Forbes. A major thrust of activity for all is to galvanize researchers, clinicians, and policymakers to harmful aspects of artificial intelligence, such as biased algorithms. I want every nurse and doctor within range to work through their professional society to make change. Do you know that very few professional societies, if any, have policies, procedures, or toolkits to help bridge the digital divide between you, the provider, and their patients? But the provider can help their patient become an informed e-patient. Join a task force, make it happen. Propose intraprofessional policy aimed at upskilling the workforce in the area of genetics and genomics nursing and precision health. These areas, by definition, involve digital health and the big data derived from it, and we are skeletal to that policy proposed to this year's American Nurses Association convention this June. If it passes, this will be the first generalist practitioner society officially endorsing aspects of digital health. Lastly, here at Cal State San Bernardino, we have a motto. It's called Define the Future. Now it's time to go define your future. Define your health within that future, and that includes your digital health within your future. Be an e-patient.
My personal mission is to help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world. One of the questions we were asked as children was, what do you want to be when you grow up? As a child, I loved to draw and sketch, and I wanted to be an architect. At some point along the journey, I realized math was not my forte. That being my reality, designing skyscrapers was probably not in my future. We have hopes. We have dreams. We have aspirations as we learn, as we grow, and as we experience life. We show up in adulthood, and we go on job interviews. One of the most frequently asked interview questions is, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? I never answer the question in the traditional sense. The interviewer's framework is usually concerned with career goals, specific companies, and locale. It's a linear question. First, then this, and then that. My answer is, I will work from my strengths in a role that is aligned with my personal mission statement and code of ethics. I choose to do so because they speak to what I value and hold to be right and true with the world. The job or state of the world does not change who I am, so I can confidently operate from this framework. My personal mission is to help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world. In the first semester of my doctoral program in organizational leadership at Pepperdine University, my cohort spent time exploring our personal leadership styles. My personal mission statement came as a result of the reflections on how I wanted to show up in the world. I had to imagine, and I had to give voice to who and how I would show up as a leader. That was life-defining work that led to the development of my personal code of ethics, the highway. The highway. We are no longer children. No one is asking what we want to be when we grow up. We are always in pursuit of some form of answer to that question. Our futures have to be built upon a solid foundation in order to grow, to learn, and to expand our horizons. That foundation includes a personal mission statement and code of ethics that does not change with each job or our life phase. Who you are at a core changes jobs and makes life better and clearer for you and for those around you. Others benefit. It is imperative that you share it with the folks that will journey with you and hold you accountable for being who you say you are and doing what you say you will do. As I live out the highway and help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world, I will exhibit an optimistic countenance from sunrise to sunset and beyond. This is probably the hardest task in my personal code of ethics. In every situation, it is my attempt to see the glass as half full instead of half empty. I look for the sunshine at the end of every rainbow. There may not be gold, but there will be sunshine. As a person of deep faith, spiritual practices like attending worship and prayer have helped me to wake up every morning and embrace what is possible. Faith helps me to see what is right with and in the world. I will exhibit an optimistic countenance from sunrise to sunset and beyond. As I live out the highway and I help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world, I will treat my body as a temple with a daily exercise regimen and healthy eating. One of my favorite cookbooks is a healthy eating cookbook by R&B singer and legend Patti LaBelle. In it, she says, treat your body like a temple, not an amusement park. Treat your body like a temple, not an amusement park. Anyone who follows me on social media knows that I love food. I love high-end restaurants. I love food trucks. I love hole-in-the-wall restaurants. And I love firing up the grill in my own backyard. I'm a native Texan, and there is nothing like some good barbecue or some fried catfish. As a result of my love affair with food, my weight has fluctuated throughout the years. We are not to purposely destroy our temples with unhealthy lifestyles. I have committed to making exercise a part of my daily routine. Living in Southern California makes getting outdoors and moving a lot easier. I go to boot camp twice a week at 5:45 a.m. I have returned to one of my favorite childhood activities, riding the bicycle several times a week. There are so many great bike paths to see along the mountains, along beaches, and along rivers and urban city streets. Our region has some amazing hikes that I have yet to fully explore the entire region. I also love leisurely walks and looking at trees and flowers and hearing birds chirping as the sun rises each morning. It's a struggle, but I make attempts to center healthy eating as a consistent part of my lifestyle. I do my best to abstain from fast food and fried foods. It's easy to roll through a drive-thru, but I try my best to eat a balanced diet that includes all of the food groups in the correct portions. You want to talk about hard? Woo, for a foodie, it is hard work to do that. I will treat my body as a temple with a daily exercise regimen and healthy eating. As I live out the highway, as I help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world, I will not sit in judgment of others. I will meet people where they are in life, no matter what their circumstance or situation. I acknowledge that I do not totally know the motivation or perception of others. If I knew their perception, then I could come closer to understanding their motivation and their actions. Perception is interpreting stimuli according to organized experience. We see things not as they are, but as we are. My perception filters may lead to biases or even prejudices. In my educational process, I realized that my perception is my truth, regardless of the facts. Your perception is your truth, regardless of the facts. We must discover the facts together. Most people tend to judge themselves more charitably than others. We are influenced by what is most obvious and cling to first impressions. I desire to have empathy, the ability to recreate another's perspective even more than sympathy, and compassion for another's predicament. I am morally obligated to treat everyone with respect regardless of who they are and how they do or do not agree with me. This country boy right here has been blessed to travel the world. With personal and professional travel, I have journeyed to 6 of the 7 continents, 45 of our 50 United States, and about 29 countries. I have met people from all over the world from all walks of life. I strive to treat everyone with respect. This includes people of all colors, sizes, socioeconomic backgrounds, lifestyles, political persuasions, and every other category society upholds. I want to break down walls, and I want to build bridges. I will not sit in judgment of others. I will meet people where they are in life, no matter what their circumstance or situation. As I live out the highway, as I help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world, I will value interpersonal interactions with family, friends, and coworkers. In all interactions, I will seek to build relationships of trust and unity that nurture and build up the persons who are around me. I've always tried to be an encourager. Whether at work or at play, I believe that everyone needs a positive word or two in their life. Everyone needs someone to pour words of encouragement into their spirit, which lifts their whole being. It lets people know that you see them and they matter. This is most easily accomplished among friends and family who have high degrees of intimacy. Characteristics of intimate relationships are marked by high degrees of warmth and affection, trust, self-disclosure, and commitment. The melody of thankfulness is encouragement, and it is hope. I believe that by encouraging and building up the people who are around you, you become a better person in the process. I will value interpersonal interactions with family, friends, and coworkers. In all interactions, I will seek to build relationships of trust and unity that nurture and build up the persons who are around me. As I live out the highway, and I help people find the greater good in humanity by celebrating what is right in the world, I will live a life filled with great joy, great excitement, and a personal commitment to excellence, never looking back saying I should have or I could have, but instead saying I did. Life for me is an exciting adventure. Tomorrow is promised to no one. Each day I want to do my best. My best is different depending upon what obstacles and what opportunities are presented. I want to take advantage of every opportunity that is presented. I never want to look back in life with regret, but look back with amazement and in wonder. When the journey along the highway of life comes to an end, the thing I want to be said is that I lived well, I lived with purpose, and I lived with others in mind. I will live a life filled with great joy, excitement, and a personal commitment to excellence, never looking back saying I could have or I should have, but instead saying I did. I'm living my best life when I'm living the highway. What is your personal mission? What would you include in your personal code of ethics? Are you willing to post them so that folks in your orbit can hold you accountable as to how you want to show up in the world? One of the quotes that I live by is from journalist Hunter S. Thompson. Thompson says that life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? I never answer that question in the traditional sense. The interviewer's framework is usually concerned with career goals, specific companies, and locales. It's a linear question. First, then this, and then that. I always answer that I will work from my strengths in a role that is aligned with my personal mission statement and my personal code of ethics. If I do this, I know that when my journey is complete, I can skid into the grave proclaiming, wow, What a ride, what a ride. I want to have lived a life saying I did. I know that I would have lived my personal mission to the fullest, helping people see the greater good in humanity by celebrating what's right in the world. As we define the future, what's your mission? What statement will your life make?
Imagine a banker comes to you and offers you a deal. The deal is that you will receive $3,600 every day, and you must spend as much as you can, if possible, all of it. Only downside of this deal is that you cannot save the money in any means. You must return the remaining balance by the end of the day. However, next morning you will receive another $3,600. Wouldn't that be a great deal? Wouldn't you try your best to spend every penny? If you equate the number of minutes in a day, we do receive 3,600 minutes every day. We can spend it in any way we want, just like the banker's condition. Only downside is that you cannot save any minute from today to spend tomorrow, and you lose all the minutes you didn't spend today. So, how do we get the best out of this deal? Only way to use the best out of 3,600 minutes is learning how to spend each minute mindfully and meaningfully. Our ability to intentionally attend and examine the present moment changes how we perceive our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Analogically, the mindfulness skill is just like training for a marathon. We cannot expect anyone to run a marathon or even half of it without a proper training. In the same way, we cannot expect people to be aware of their thoughts and feelings without proper training. The good news is that just like training for a marathon, mindfulness is a learnable and teachable skill. Studies show that mindfulness people those who are mindful, are psychologically flexible, emotionally stable and happier, and physically healthier than those who are less mindful of their thoughts and feelings. Mindfulness as a skill can be implemented in daily activities if you can provide an accurate guidance and a proper mindset. If you develop a mindset to perceive thoughts or feelings as they are rather than the way you want, you are less likely to experience stress in the following moment, less likely to regret your choices and decisions. Hence, you start to change your future moments with a simple skill, that is the mindfulness skill. Everything we choose to do today defines our tomorrow. I look at the idea of the future from a microscopic level. In other words, rather than thinking about the future as upcoming months or years, it can be perceived as the succeeding moment of the present moment. If you are to take a task at the present moment, whether achievable or not achievable, it may cause stress or joy. It may involve gain or loss. The consequence of your approach to the present moment immediately begins to ensue in the next moment. Most of the time, we habitually or instinctually react without giving too many thoughts into those reactions. Instinctual reaction does not assess the real nature of our thoughts and feelings. Such reaction is quick to cling if it is appealing and push away if it is not appealing. In contrast, a mindfulness response examines the true nature of our thoughts and feelings. It helps us to see things as they are and maintain equanimity of our mind. The mindfulness skill teaches us that only the moment we can control is the present moment. So, why not choose to say or do things with our best ability in those moments? People learn to manage and even manipulate their own future and not allowing the future to control or define them when they are mindful. Therefore, mindfulness is one of the most needed skills to define the future. So, how can we really be mindful and take a momentary pause that is most needed? Rather than I continue to talk, I let you experience talk through your practice. If you may, let's find a less busy place to sit for about 2 minutes as I demonstrate how to sit and how to practice this mindfulness. Please pay close attention to the sound of the bell so you can ground yourself. If you allow yourself to close your eyes very gently, keep your back straight if possible, not too stiff, just straight upright so you can focus better. Now gently bring your attention to your breath, and let's take a deep breath very mindfully. As you breathe out, notice the airflow passing through your nostril. Take one more deep breath with full attention to the flow of air. Hold it for a second. Breathe out, release the air. Let's take one more deep breath. Hold it for a second and relax. Now very gently bring your attention to tip of your nose where you felt the touch of air passing through your nostril. This time as you breathe in, make a mental note or say to yourself in your mind silently, breathing in, breathing in. As you breathe out, make another mental note, say to yourself in your mind, breathing out, breathing out. Let your breath flow naturally. Keep your attention at the incoming and outgoing breath. Pay close attention to incoming breath and make mental note as you breathe in, say to yourself, breathing in, breathing in. When you breathe out, say to yourself in your mind, breathing out, breathing out. If you missed a breath or two, no worries. Just focus at the present breath. You may notice the beginning of breath. As you notice the beginning of breath, make a mental note, beginning of incoming breath, middle of incoming breath, and the end of incoming breath. Beginning of outgoing breath, middle of outgoing breath, end of outgoing breath. With full awareness, you inhale and exhale. If you pay close attention, you may notice a very brief pause between inhalation and exhalation. Be aware of it. From the beginning of incoming breath, middle of incoming breath, end of incoming breath, the pause. Beginning of outgoing breath, middle of outgoing breath, end of outgoing breath, the second pause. Be mindful of one breath cycle. Make mental notes precisely when you breathe in and breathe out. Not before, not after. Exactly when the breath comes in and goes out. If you notice that your mind starts to wander, gently take your attention from your breath to the wandering mind. Now make another mental note. Say to yourself silently, the mind is wandering, the mind is wandering, the mind is wandering. Soon you will notice that the wandering mind loses its power. Now you can gently bring it back to your breath and mindfully observe the incoming breath and outgoing breath. You will hear the second ring of a bell. Take your attention from breath to the sound and pay attention to the echo to bring you back to your surrounding. You may open your eyes when you're ready. After this brief session of mindfulness practice, I'm sure you feel how it goes when you practice. But I'm sorry to tell you that you're not fully enlightened yet, nor your future has fully defined yet. Nevertheless, you just began the journey. Knowing the direction from CSUSB to Las Vegas is not enough to get there. We actually need to commute to arrive there. The same argument is true about the mindfulness skill. Knowledge is useful only if we test with our experience. Training for a marathon does not limit your skill of running to a race alone. In the same way, developing the mindfulness skill focused on breath is not limited to breath alone. It's a skill. As you master the skill, application is infinite. I've been practicing and teaching this skill for years now. As a practitioner and also a teacher, there are so many interesting incidents happened during my time. I was teaching mindfulness skill to inmates at Glen Helen Rehabilitation Center for about 2 years. Most of them were cynical about the idea, but at least open to try it. They learned mindfulness within 2 to 3 sessions of 10 minutes practice. One day, while I was teaching a class at GHRC, a sheriff deputy accompanied Mark to my classroom. Mark was one of my students for a month. It was his day of release. He came and told me, "Mr. Sai, I called my wife yesterday after 9 months of silence. I couldn't accept that my wife had cheated on me. But I dared to call her yesterday. This time I didn't speak. I paid attention to what she had to say. I let her speak. I listened to her for the first time in a phone call. She felt the difference. She started sobbing. In a broken voice, she told me what happened after I was imprisoned. For the first time, I heard the whole story. I felt different after the phone call. I was being mindful during that phone call. Mark thanked me for teaching him the mindfulness skill and left the classroom, and I never saw him again in the jail. Fast forward 6 months later, I received a call from my friend Natalie, who used to work at Barstow as a marriage and family therapist intern. She asked me if I knew Mark, who was released from Glen Helen a few months ago. It didn't take me that long to recall who he was. Natalie said Mark came to a couples therapy with his wife. Natalie added that Mark wants me to know that he's still practicing mindfulness. Mark chose to spend his 10 out of 3,600 minutes to learn this new skill when he was in my classroom. He continued to practice the skill. It changed his life. I dare to say that he defined his future by mindfully responding for a few seconds during that phone call. Imagine a mindful response becomes our nature during stressful and also joyful moments. You start to use each minute of your day carefully and mindfully. Isn't that a better plan to define our future? Thank you.
Let me tell you a story. It's a love story. It's a love story between someone who has passed away and someone who is still alive. While this may sound a little bit odd to speak about a love story between someone who is alive and someone who is no longer breathing, I suspect that this is how many people feel who carry love in their hearts for a person who has died. The love story I'm going to tell you is the story between Michael and his wife, Gloria. Gloria died a couple of years ago after they were married for more than 50 years. Our conversation began with a simple question when I asked Michael, "Could you tell me your wife's name and a bit about her?" Michael had no trouble sharing touching memories, nor did he find it hard to recount the stories that made him laugh and the moments that brought tears to his eyes. The years of their marriage were the basis for a rich relationship, and he was eager to introduce his wife to me, posthumously. As he and I spoke, I asked him to tell me what he loved about his wife. He shared with me how his wife was a music teacher who inspired her students. He told of Gloria's love for her family and how she adored their 9 grandchildren. He valued their shared volunteer work for socially just causes. Michael's eyes lit up as he spoke about Gloria's passion for nature and how he loved to place flowers next to her bed when she could no longer go outside. He admired her strength and how she used music to curb the pain of a debilitating illness that ultimately led to her death. As Michael told me more details of this graceful and beautiful woman, his love for her, and how much he adored her, it was as if Gloria entered the room, pulled up a chair, and sat listening to her stories being told. Like Michael, when a person we love dies, we do not stop thinking about them. We do not stop caring for them, and we do not stop wanting to recall the best of the times between us. Unfortunately, these cherished memories have often been buried alongside our loved ones, relegated to a place dictated by past tense descriptions of a relationship gone by. Let me explain. For the last 100 years, the intersections of psychology and medicine have created a particular model of grief psychology that has insisted on a one-size-fits-all practice that can sever precious memories. These practices have been prescribed in medical offices and in many counseling conversations, often advising bereaved people that they should accept that their loved one is gone and that their grief will wind its way through a series of stages or tasks. This model is one that we are familiar with, even if we have never ever read a psychology book or taken a psychology class. It is a model that is built in descriptions that most often include the 5 stages of grief, that prescribes the letting go, the saying goodbye, and finding closure to a relationship. We hear it everywhere, on television shows, we read it in greeting cards, and even from well-intended people who surround us. Up until very recently, these practices have dominated how people have come to believe what is the correct way to grieve. For example, bereaved people are encouraged to write letters of farewell to their deceased loved ones, or they are encouraged to perform rituals of letting go. It is not unusual to see these practices at memorial services, like we might see the releasing of balloons or the releasing of butterflies, or even advice is given in hopes to resolve unfinished business between the living and the dead. Bereaved people might even be told when the right time is to give away items that are connected to their loved ones. Now, for some, this may be useful to find that sense of closure or completion, but for many, these practices have sequestered and silenced the love for our deceased, to support a belief that the dead should rest in peace. These leading practices of grief psychology have removed the context of relationship and can overlook the way in which a person has died. Conventional grief psychology can perhaps even accentuate our heart's yearning for connection to those who are no longer breathing, and it forces the dead to live on as if they are a ghost without shape or form. Moving on and forgetting, to me, seems like a cruel way to treat a person or even an animal who we love that has passed away. But what if there were another way? What if rather than saying goodbye when a person dies and disconnecting from their relationship, we were to think about what remains? What if rather than letting go, we focus on what continues to be vital? Obviously, the relationship will change. The relationship changes when a person dies, and this requires a different way of us connecting to them. But the desire to tell the stories, to hold the love that we shared, is an affirming opportunity to enliven these relationships. I believe remembering practices are the future of grief psychology. Affirming the best of relationships between the living and those who are no longer breathing crafts a new way forward where the deepest pain of grief can ease. Using memories and love to fashion a relationship between people like Michael and Gloria grows hope, where the relationship can act like a beacon of light, guiding us in what can be some of the darkest days of life. To step into the future of grief psychology, Michael and Gloria teach us that we must maintain connection. Now, this enlists a whole different set of grief assumptions that differ from grief psychology. The first thing that we can learn when we look at the story between Michael and Gloria is that love does not die when a person dies. Love does not die when a person dies. The love that we shared becomes a resource for the living that can be tapped into as if it is a guide to fill a healing place for our hearts and as a source of inspiration to find meaning or renewed purpose. When we follow Michael and Gloria's story, we also learn that people do not want to be forgotten, and the bereaved do not want to forget those who have died. I believe that remembering practices re-centers the love for those who are no longer breathing and affirms that they still matter to us. Remembering practices provides the thinking and the tools that shifts grief psychology towards love and towards relationship. Remembering practices has the potential to alleviate the deepest pain of longing, the kind of pain that can steal our breath and can bring us to our knees. Remembering the best of the past to shape a way forward can provide healing for the wounds that grief can bring. Remembering those who have died means that we can actively conjure their stories to mind. We can speak about the cherished memories. We can introduce the stories of them to people who did not know them. Remembering is not a passive process, but one where we continue to feel our love for people who have been significant to us, and we can even imagine their love for us. Remembering those who have passed away allows us to actively include them in our lives. Through this inclusion, we can form new meaning and new purpose while we continue to carry our shared memories to shape us into a new experience. Practicing remembering looks like Michael introducing me to his wife, Gloria. Remembering practices also looks like the mother who speaks to her son every morning as she is preparing for her day, even though he has been dead for more than a decade. Remembering is also the wife who finds comfort in wearing her husband's bathrobe to sleep in. She imagines his arms around her, hugging her tight, and this brings her comfort. These practices create loving memories, bringing a sense of the person who is no longer alive closer to us. Michael and Gloria also teach us there is no time limit as to when we have to stop saying a loved one's name out loud. and there is no time limit when stories have to stop being told. This includes that we are not required to let go of meaningful items or cut the bonds between the living and those who are no longer breathing. We can invite loved ones who are no longer with us physically to travel with us. They can travel with us to the grocery store, to workplaces, to celebrations we share, and to places of worship. Michael and Gloria teach us so much. They further teach us that remembering can both be a private act or ritual to connect with our deceased loved ones, but they can also be very public moments. Remembering practices are the sharing of stories around a holiday meal, of years gone by, or perhaps it's the acknowledging of a deceased person's pride in the new graduate. Public acts of remembering looks like the time when the actor Jamie Foxx spoke during his Oscar acceptance speech that he could not wait to go to sleep that night and have a conversation in his dreams with his deceased grandmother about his accomplishment. We all have grandmothers or others who have passed away in very public spaces to consult and to feel their pride in our accomplishments. When a relationship was loving, we want to celebrate this for the years to come. For Michael, this meant he could introduce his wife to me and what was shared between them, and that invoked her presence. Remembering weaves a future tapestry for Michael, where Gloria's imagined presence has a hand in creating the appearance of this tapestry's texture and its hues. If Michael were only to be guided to adjust to being alone, or how to say goodbye to the love of his life, this tapestry remains colorless, and everyone loses. Their children, their 9 grandchildren, and for all those who have yet to be introduced to Gloria, and to hear of Michael's beautiful love for her. Instead, when we practice the remembering, it is highlighted in such a way that their love is entwined in what continues to give daily meaning to him. Michael speaks to her in his favorite reading chair, where there's a lovely picture of Gloria next to him. He tells me it's a comfort to have her nearby as he points to the picture. He consults her opinion on important matters. He tells me that this is mostly on all matters, but mostly involving those of his children and their grandchildren. He explains that he likes to keep her updated, knowing that this would be important to Gloria. Remembering practices brings her imagined voice, one that Michael would no doubt be very familiar with after more than a half-century of marriage, to life. It is her voice, along with his, that creates this beautiful tapestry, woven with colors and threads that are new. Michael and Gloria's stories, as told by him, as well as their children and their grandchildren, can add to this beautiful, vibrant tapestry. Remembering practices can inform grief psychology and counseling conversations where relationships are centered to uphold the best of our loving humanity. Remembering can ease the suffering of parents whose newborn has died, or soothe the shattered lives after someone we love dies by their own hand. Remembering practices can also help those who have experienced painful disconnection with the person who has died, or was caused harm and suffered abuses in the relationship. We do this by carefully restoring a sense of agency to the person who is grieving. These practices allow the bereaved to figuratively find their footing on days when this seems almost impossible. Remembering practices are not a model of grief psychology that is predicated by stages, but one that is guided by stories of love, of strength, and of connection. Michael spoke to me about the day that he brought his wife's ashes home. He told me how he felt protective of her on that day, protective of her just like when she was alive. He explained to me that when he picked her ashes up, he wasn't sure where he was going to put them. He said when he got home, he had an imagined conversation with her where he consulted her about where to put them and decided to put them on the hearth right next to where she sat and would read. He said that he imagined her presence encouraging him to do this. And he said that this was a very peaceful thing to have her ashes nearby. As someone who believes in the practice of remembering and the telling of the love stories, I know that Gloria would approve of being consulted in this way, of having the memory of her voice and their shared love invoked. She would like that this brings comfort to Michael. We all deserve this kind of love, to be cared for tenderly. And after we die, we deserve to be cared for tenderly by those who are connected to us while we are alive. To do anything less, to not practice remembering, to me, seems like such a waste to a love story. Thank you.
This is a $100 bill, and remembering its value is the most important aspect of our conversation today. My name is Nadia Heron, and I'm an educator. And like you, I am exhausted. I'm exhausted from the Zoom meetings, the conference calls, the memos, and the email threads about race. Our country is having a reckoning following the death of George Floyd, a reckoning with systemic racism. All of this time, I couldn't help but think, do we as educators lack the capability to better serve our students when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our classrooms? The truth is much darker and much more complex than we'd care to realize. We lack the will and even the motivation to try. We lack the consciousness to take responsibility for the collective failings of inequity and social injustice so deeply ingrained in our educational system. Oh, I'm exhausted though because I care, and you should too. You should care because classrooms have long been the battleground in the struggle for social injustice, and students, oh, they have consistently been leaders on the front lines. For example, in 1947, a courageous Mexican-American farming family out of California, we are always making trouble, but good trouble. This family, they dared to challenge the law and the consciousness of the American justice system, and they won. They fought for equal schooling for their 3 children. This Mendez v. Westminster case was able to lay the foundation for Thurgood Marshall to argue the Brown v. Board of Education case in front of the Supreme Court. And that is the case that upended segregated classrooms across this nation. And yeah, that's great. But 67 years later, we are still waiting on equality in the classroom, wildly grasping at diversity through a haze of racial tension and virtue signaling as inequality persists. Oh, you should care because we know that the research says that students internalize the unfair treatment that they experience in the classroom. When you see them as limited, small, subhuman, they begin to believe the same about themselves. We must not tolerate such conduct from a professional segment of persons entrusted to educate, enlighten, and inspire. The truth is, if our classrooms are the symbolic barometer for the future health of our nation, then instructors must intentionally embody their role in the health of said nation or risk ideological genocide. We must have equality in our classrooms and restructure the function of those who refuse to change. After all, classrooms are becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. According to the U.S. Census in 2018, of the undergraduate student population, 52.9% were white. 20.9 were Hispanic, 15.1 were Black, 7.6% were Asian, and everybody else identified as other. Keep up. That same year, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, of the full-time professors, 75% were white, 12% were Asian, and for Hispanic and African American full-time professors, they represented 6% respectively. There is a glaring gap between the faculty and the student population that we claim to serve. These statistics speak to the chasms and polarization that have long impeded meaningful progress in the aim of social justice and mobilizing for change in our classrooms. Moreover, this profound gap is the primer for a slurry of potentially harmful interactions, similar to what we saw with the professor whose response regarding a simple question surrounding the recent unrest earned him a suspension and cause to be fired. Furthermore, it led to a breakdown of trust and a loss of that relationship, that sacred relationship between teacher and pupil. If academic minds can come together and solve Pierre Fermat's last theorem, then surely we can solve this issue of racism in our lifetime. If we can put a man on the moon, then certainly we can address inequity and social injustice in our classrooms. We can begin by closing the representation gap in institutions of higher learning across this country. You should care because the future of our nation will look like the student population that we serve today. Their tomorrow rests upon our shoulders. Now, if a Black student walks into your classroom, know that they have defied the odds. Know that they continue to participate in a system designed for their failure. A system that created laws to prevent them from gaining wealth and then would criminalize their poverty. A system that would prevent them from reading, making it illegal for them to read and then punish them for being illiterate. A system designed to send them from the classroom to the prison pipeline. A uniquely American system that assaults them on every front, from disparities in their health care to confinement in impoverished neighborhoods to disproportionate exposure to inferior schoolings to significantly greater dangers and encounters with law enforcement. And I could go on. From the labor market discrimination that's waiting for them on the other side of graduation, to a television media, and this one is important, to a television media that manufactures and reinforces disparaging portraits of their identity by telling you that they, as Black people, are subhuman, validating the abuse that they receive. Know that when these students sign their names on the papers and assignments that they turn into you, they're not really signing their names. They're actually signing the names of the person who owned their great-great-grandparent in slavery. Pause for just a second and realize how deep the veins of systemic racism run. Many are going to be defeated before they even walk through the door, but they're still coming. They are walking through your classroom doors, and many are met with instructors who express dissent for their skin through harmful microaggressions or a pathologizing of their culture. These affronts are often coupled with assumptions of criminality, resulting in over-policing on our college campuses and universities. Black people portrayed as violent in America, when more often than not, we are on the receiving end of said violence. They face ascriptions of their intelligence, while they're more accurately experiencing historic growth in education. In 2015, a report by Nielsen documented that high school graduation rates and the percentage of Black high school graduates enrolled in college jumped to historic heights, outpacing that of any other ethnic group, outpacing that of the total population, period. But just because they're brilliant doesn't mean that they don't feel. Know that, ironically, the first time many of them experience racism was in the classroom, and know that they will more than likely continue to experience the weight and trauma of racism throughout their lifetime. But I know this too really has nothing to do with you. So the question remains, why should you care? As the nation recovers from the polarizing events that follow the death of George Floyd, and we return to our campuses, classrooms, and community, as educators, we must acknowledge some pretty daunting realities. This is not just about the death of George Floyd. We must acknowledge that his death is only a singular occurrence in a scathing epidemic of collective race-based violence and systemic oppression perpetrated on Black persons in this country since its inception. We must cease in our failure to recognize the undeniable truth. America is a great nation, but it was built on a foundation of hate that encompassed slavery, white supremacy, and mass genocide. A foundation that cannot stand if you choose to, if we choose to. Will we continue to be passive participants in a culture of silence in our classrooms? Or will we begin to develop a consciousness to be a part of something bigger than ourselves? Now, I understand, no, you are not responsible for something that happened centuries ago that you have nothing to do with. But you do have the opportunity to be a part of a solution for what's going on right now. Contemporary oppression, contemporary marginalization, and contemporary brutal violence. We are dying today. You have the opportunity to be a part of a kind of justice that will ripple through the generations. The academic community we must adopt an iterative process of developing and enforcing meaningful strategies in the aim of peace from systemic violence and racism aimed at minoritized communities, more specifically African American people in our educational system and society as a whole. We are here today because a man propelled by centuries of racial injustice kneeled on another man's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Now, there were 3 other people there, and had one taken one of those seconds to speak up, we might not be here today. I'm not asking you to abandon any long-held religious or political beliefs. I'm just asking you, no, I am begging you to speak up. Inequality persists in our classrooms, and it is time that we adjust our behavior accordingly. This will require collective efforts of deliberative engagement, authentic dialogic interaction with interorganizational, interdivisional, and interdisciplinary alignment. The future of this country will be decided in our classrooms. The future of this country, educators, it will be shaped by you. And that's why it is time to care. Now, I did not forget about this $100 bill. To the African American students under the sound of my voice, like this $100 bill, you may have been walked on, stepped over, you may feel overlooked, but you must never forget your value. You see, I didn't forget this $100 bill because it still has its value. You must never forget your value so that in your success, you may pay homage to the generation of Black folks that came before you and shed their blood that their progeny might know true freedom. You must never forget your value that you may give hope and inspire action in the next generation that's coming up behind you, that they may take the torch of progress, that they may take the tenets of Black genius and run with it without restraint. No, you must never forget your value. Remember that you are seen, you are supported, you are loved, and you are invaluable. My name is Nadia Heron, and I thank you so much for listening.
Hi, my name is Jaquette Dumas, and I'm so excited to be able to share with you all today. Let's jump right into it. Now, this is not an adorable picture that makes me think of happy times, but this is a picture that is probably about 20 years old that I am sharing with you, and this is a picture of me. Can you guess which one is me? I am definitely standing here full of optimism. This picture was drawn of me and one of my colleagues by a student. And this was a time where I felt full of hope, full of ambition, and I started my first year teaching. I'll tell you what, that feeling did not last long. At the end of that school year, I realized that I had failed my students miserably. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh, come on, it probably wasn't that bad. You probably did okay. You were a first-year teacher. No, I'm talking failed them miserably. I got to the end of the school year that the student has represented here, and at the end of the year, I realized that my African American students had not done very well. Not done poorly, but failed, in my opinion. Failed because they were feeding into the statistics that we were seeing at the time in education. And I realized that all of that ambition, all of that hope, all of those well wishes were wasted in a year full of good intentions rather than intentional decisions. Have you ever failed at something? How did it feel when you failed miserably? How did it feel? What did it look like to rethink your decisions? What did it look like to rethink your steps? Well, that was me. That was me thinking about how could I be an African American teacher and present and spend a year with students and at the end they not be successful. I'm African American. How could this happen? But I realized that it's not just about good intentions. It's not about ambition. It's not about hope. It is about making a series of decisions and watching those decisions make change in our community. Now, I like math, and I know, don't hate me for liking math. I love math, actually. I want you to take a look at this problem. I want you to solve this problem if you can. So you got 3 numbers here. It's not a trick answer. Yes, they're going in descending order, but these numbers represent much more than a simple math problem or a brain bender. These numbers represent a plight of a community. 45 years of stalled progress in education. 45 years of educators attempting to change the trajectory of our African American students. 45 years of attempting to close an achievement gap. 45 years of reform, 45 years of superintendents, 45 years of parents, 45 years of changes, 45 years of legislation, 45 years where we attempted to rectify for a group of students the education that they so well deserve. 45 years. 15 represents the percent of African American students who are proficient in reading. Proficient or above. That's the number combined. 15%. Yeah, you did your math right. That means that 85% of our African American students, they read below grade level, many far below grade level. I think you're kind of getting the sense that this is not your do now or your seat bell work when you come into your math class. 8 represents the number of African American male students who drop out of school. These are the numbers. These are the facts. These are the representation of our students who we have failed miserably. And I don't say this to point you out. I say this to point myself out. I say this to point out our community. We are in a state of emergency. And what happens in a state of emergency? There must be a response in a state of emergency. Imagine a student. Imagine a student who grows up in a single parent home, qualifies for free and reduced lunch. Imagine a student who attends a school with very limited resources. Imagine a student that by the time that student hit 10th grade, that student went to a school where the school simply ran out of math classes. There were such little resources available for that student that there were no longer any classes for mathematics. Yes, that means they could not meet their A through G requirements on campus at that school. Imagine a student who looks around campus and the best role model they could find was a sprinkle of teachers, a handful of teachers' aides, and some support staff that they saw on occasion, but no role models in administration, and even the role models on campus that were teachers, it was hit or miss whether that teacher would actually be matched with that student. Imagine a student who attends an AP English class, and that teacher of that AP English class tells that student, you are not qualified to be in this class. There's no amount of work that you could do that could make you qualify to write well enough to be successful in this class. I'm not going to make you imagine anymore. You are looking at that said student. I am the statistics of what has been written about our African American student. The problem is that there is a difference that can be made. I am living the difference, and my community made the difference. I am not that inherently smart. I was not raised in a family that knew everything to do. I was not given the rules or the guidelines of how to overcome the plight of what I was dealt with, but I was blessed with a community. And the community around me, they pushed me to be. And I'm not talking about my African American community, because for many, they may think, wow, that's awesome. Her immediate community rallied around her. No, it was not African American community. It was a diverse community of people who pushed me to be, and they made the difference. It was a diverse community of people, different ages, different racial backgrounds, and really different platforms. All of the people who are in this community did not exist just in my school. They existed in my neighborhood. They existed in my church. They existed between the kind words of a grocer who saw me counting the items in the basket and trying to race my mom to figure out the bill so that I could get the quarter or some of the change that was left over, and that grocer encouraging me that I was almost there. It came from a full 360-degree community that pushed me to be and eliminated the statistics that tried to dictate what my future would be. And with that difference and pushing me to be, they also believed. Belief is a powerful thing. Belief can change the trajectory of anything that you're facing in life. Belief will cause you to change the deficit thinking when it comes to our African American community and our African American students. That belief is going to be the difference when we cause this rallying around of those who are in need the most. That belief is going to change the understanding or the common belief that African American parents do not show up because they do not care. The belief is that our African American parents, while they may not know what to do, they do care. The belief has to change into the mindset of really thinking about this idea that not only can students achieve, but our Black students will achieve. And that simple shift in mindset makes the difference. Yeah, here I am with the numbers again. 4,120. Those are my kids. You're looking at me, you're making some calculations. You're thinking 10 months, how old could she be? I know, it happens. I talk about my kids like they're my kids because they're my kids. Now, I've only birthed 6 in the natural, it's true. But all 4,120 students that have come through my doors as a classroom teacher and as an administrator, they are my students. 18,000. That's approximately the amount of students that I've touched through teaching teachers, and they are my students. 7.7 million. That's how many African American students we have in the U.S., and they are my students. What do you mean? Okay, I know you kind of were with me at first, right, with the 4,000. But all of these students, they're not just my students, but they are our students. They belong to our communities. They belong to our future. When we think about responsibility, it can be daunting, but our future is defined by our response to today's problems. And the way that we respond, whether we respond well or whether we do not respond well, it is our ability to respond that will define where we are going. It will define the breakthroughs in science. It will define how we overcome the social ills and social problems. And so that's why I propose to you that those 7.7 million, they're not my students. They're not just my students. They are not the problem of the African American community. They're not even the problem of our current education system. They're not the problem of the local poor school down the street. They are our shared issue. They are our students. They are our future. They are our success. They are the ones who we are depending on to look at how we will thrive. And so when we take on this shared responsibility, it's not a burden, but it's an opportunity for us to rally together and become a powerful community. When we look at this responsibility, I'm asking you to do three things. I'm asking you to show up. I'm asking you to speak up. I'm asking you to pay up. They are our Black students. They don't belong to one lane of people, but they belong to all of us. When we look at the 45 years and the plight of what we've seen, it has to be more than one group of society to show up. What does showing up look like? Show up as a mentor. Show up as an organization. Show up and be there when people are rallying around education and policies. Show up. Show up in your vote, and then show up with your voice. Speak up. Speak up about the social ills and the injustice that you're observing. We need more than a social media post. We need more than this feeling of empathy that overwhelms us when we see these numbers or when we even hear a TEDx talk on it. We need more than this feeling and emotion that goes absolutely nowhere. We need for that emotion to turn into your voice to cry out loud against what you see, against the trends. Ask the hard questions. Ask why the lack of diversity in administration. Ask why the lack of progress in your community. Ask why. Ask where the dollars are going when we look at community organizations and programs. And speaking of that, pay up. Take your resources and put them where it counts. Maybe you don't know where to put the resources. Do the research and put in your time resources. Put in your money. As a community, we have a responsibility, and this responsibility is not to the children you birthed, not to the children that go to the school that your children happen to go to, not to the school up to the street, but all of our students, our Black students, our future, our community.
I would like to start by giving thanks to the Yuhaviatam Serrano First Nation, whose unceded, stolen, traditional indigenous homeland I call home. What I'm about to share with you relates to shared ongoing struggles. To those who long for liberation. There is a meme with a shot from the Matrix films where Morpheus, portrayed by Lawrence Fishburne, informs Neo of the existence of artificial intelligence programs known as agents that can move in and out of any software hardwired to the system. A second variation presents a shot from the moment Morpheus gives Neo the option of taking a blue pill to continue to live in the world of illusion, or a red pill to enter a painful reality where he is conscious of the existence of the Matrix. Captioned with, "What if I told you?" it is usually followed by a ridiculous petty revelation. Tired of the misuse of the Matrix references by Trump supporters and alt-right conspiracy groups, Lily Wachowski slammed both Ivanka Trump and Elon Musk via Twitter. The film is pointing at something we could say ironically is a problem that stems from that which supremacists are supporting. This is because, without a proactive will toward consciousness, the programming of the Matrix is invisibilized, even to the agents who extend its goals, formats, and logic. I support reclaiming these references for decoloniality from supremacist ideology pushed by the agents who are everyone and they're no one. Anyone who is not unplugged or conscious of the history of power and its context is potentially an agent. In August 2020, Wachowski said the Matrix is an allegory for trans identity, and because of this reason, it is also about our current context in coloniality and the matrix of power, which continue to make transphobia, racism, sexism, ableism, and all other isms and phobias possible. Peruvian sociologist, political theorist Aníbal Quijano Obregón warned us of the existence of a matrix of power. His perspective comes from a lineage of decolonial resistance work in support of indigenous farm workers, student, and working class movements, while based on the ideas of Peruvian journalist, activist José Carlos Mariátegui Lachira, who Quijano credits as one of the first critics to become unplugged from the matrix of colonial power in the Americas, which leaked beyond colonial institutions infecting world systems and even our very own existence. The red pill, or the consciousness Mariátegui and Quijano share with the world, stems from an indigenized decolonial perspective on the current world system. In his 1991 article, Coloniality and Modernity Rationality, Quijano states, "With the conquest of the societies and the cultures which inhabit what today is called Latin America, began the constitution of a new world order, culminating 500 years later into a global power covering the entire planet. The coloniality of power constitutes a matrix of methods and patterns of power embedded in our world system and made possible by racial and revamped gender discriminations marked during the colonization of the Americas." Quijano explains colonialism established direct political, social, and cultural European domination over the conquered of all continents. With the world's resources brutally concentrated and exploited, and people forced into slave labor for the benefit of a European minority of the human species, particularly its most dominant classes, the marginality experienced by those most impacted by colonization in their lands and in the diasporas into the so-called First World doesn't grow from within our identities, cultures, or races and ethnicities. We're actually dealing with the long-term effects of colonialism as we resist their continuation as coloniality of power, the matrix. Colonial discriminations based on race incorporated previous gender-based discriminations. A cishet white woman became superior to a cishet man of any other race, and any cishet man became superior to any cishet woman of color. A format of hierarchical and binary thinking and doing was imposed and generated even more hierarchies and subcategorizations of sexuality, physical and mental abilities, social class, spirituality, and much more. These constructions were widely spread by pseudoscience, presenting lies as objective categories with a supposed ahistorical meaning and not as the result of the history of power. Quijano explains, coloniality of power has multiple dimensions and they are inseparable. Coloniality was the result of colonialism's systematic repression of the specific beliefs, ideas, images, symbols, or knowledges that were worthless to global colonial domination, while simultaneously the colonizers appropriated that which supported domination, knowledge in mining, agriculture, engineering, products, and physical labor through the dehumanization of people to flesh, bodies for all forms of enslavement. Downtown LA offers overpriced, decontextualized, squeezed juice kombucha from a hipster where there used to be a family-owned culturally specific fruteria. Gentrification is justified by the matrix. The value of beings, their culture and community are worthless, and only the parts that are beneficial to domination of individualist capitalist goals are appropriated. The myth of modernity centers on the Western Eurocentric take on what defines progress in an imposed, rigged competition. Supposedly, all other countries are simply developing or failing. Argentinian philosopher Enrique Dussel explains that the violence generated by the myth of modernity is what is really irrational. In the name of progress, dehumanization, robbery, and murder are justified. Imagine I took over the world and established that if you live differently, you're just not developing at such an advanced rate as I am. And I use this as evidence that I'm organically superior to you, and also that for progress, it's okay to kill you and take your things. Why would this ever be okay? And more hidden is what is and what counts as knowledge and how it should be made, collected, and shared. And this has been defined by institutions, but also by individual agents. During colonial times, the repression was imposed more than anything else on the ways of knowing, of producing knowledge, of creating perspectives, images and image systems, symbols, modes of signification, over the resources, patterns, and instruments of formalized and objectivized expression, intellectual or visual. Dominant content and patterns were imposed, which stopped cultural production of the dominated and were used as a method to control when oppression and murder could no longer be so bold. The few colonized who were educated, religiously and secularly, were given perks of power in exchange for them serving as agents of supremacy. Hierarchical and binary ways of thinking and doing were widespread through tools such as mass media. While entertained, we're programmed to formats and ways of doing coloniality. The promise of access to power seduces into becoming a willful agent of the matrix, aspiring to advance and progress within the confines of the system, no matter the cost. Yet, imposing the logic of coloniality onto others and enforcing its hierarchical stratification is like pissing into the wind. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire explains that those who support the colonization of the imaginary and follow it blindly are nothing more than oppressed oppressors. Stuart Hall explains how the media reflects a matrix reality that is fed while it feeds the dominant culture order through conceptual maps of meaning, or the ways we organize, classify, and represent to construct meanings within culture. In her video series, Culture Transformation, cultural theorist Bell Hooks explains how this logic is embedded in the way people, and particularly women of color, are negatively portrayed in popular media, how it is normalized, and the effects that this has on the way our society engages in and reacts to violent racial and gender injustice. The matrix is enacted through the logic which is embedded in our personal expressions, our ways of thinking and seeing the world and doing in life. As part of the 5% combined total of brown, black, and indigenous women professors who have painfully achieved tenure in academia across the US, I want to share some observations. As a transfronteriza, I grew up on both sides of the US and Mexico border. Perpetually crossing borders demystified them. They're nothing but tools of dehumanization and monuments to binary and hierarchical thinking, upholding the logic of coloniality. Borders are interdimensional, also existing at the level of education. As an artist, teacher, and mentor, I expand the reach of my work as a proponent, a transhistorical and multidimensional translator, connector and projector of decolonial and liberation ideas, philosophies, theories, using culture and pop culture, among other things. And I do this in a personal, divergent, and transdisciplinary way, going beyond the limitations of all disciplines I have been trained in, and continue to learn new ones, inventing new ways, taking and remixing elements for what is required to produce knowledge in a transfronterizo way, from the in-between and from a transgressional stance across all borders. Things seem to be shifting in terms of what is epistemologically acceptable, that is, the methods, validity, and scope of what knowledge is and can be. Still, one is often forced to assimilate to predetermined formats and content if we want to be good enough. If one does not produce knowledge in formats that our colleagues deem as valuable, our work, even if it's genius, does not count. We cannot be promoted to the next levels of professorship when this happens. Agents to supremacy bully others into abiding by the logic of coloniality, so resistance must be ingenious. And I do this in honor of a legacy of resistance to coloniality, just as my relations have done for over 600 generations at the border. I am nomadic by inheritance, a resident of what feminist Chicana fronteriza Gloria Anzaldúa called Nepantla, a time, a space, a state of mind, a will and power that emanates from the in-between. My being leads me to produce knowledge across diverse platforms through Rascuachismo, new media art explorations, ethnographic non-research, and community-centered storytelling through art production inside and outside of academia. The logic of coloniality exists in everyday life actions, words, forms of communication. People can unknowingly be agents to supremacy in the service of their own domination and the one way of seeing and doing over all other possible forms. This limiting perspective is an obsession on sameness and repetitive formats that extend to defining the very right to exist. This is why in schools many students appear to be disinterested or don't engage in the materials, because the very format of how and what is shared is reminiscent of the attempts to erase us. They can be a form of violence. Only validating and valuing what we know about and are familiar with results in the interruption of difference and innovation and the subjugation of the work. At its worst, it has materialized in the assassination of people who tried to unplug us from the matrix of supremacy. If someone has ever called you racist or phobic and you believe they deserve to be punished for it, you may be experiencing cognitive dissonance. Coined by social psychologist Leon Fitzinger, when we hold contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. Some of the most powerful agents are the fake allies who continue to refuse to listen and impose their forms of support, which actually can do more damage. Even those who follow marginalized disciplines of resistance can impose the logic of coloniality when they refuse to recognize unique methods of knowledge production that quote others who they have not read and which are based on experiences and perspectives that are even more invisibilized. Even some critical work cannot escape this matrix because of the trauma that it provokes us to function and the repressed memories of having to somehow kill a part of ourselves to be validated. In the decolonial imaginary, Chicana theorist Emma Perez points out how few have proved that assimilation is also a tactic, an interstitial move for survival. Racism and discrimination compel those new cultural survivors to be as creative as possible as they move through power. This survival may be blinding, and after all, the complex inner workings of trauma and its effects on memory and the ego make internalization possible. Speaking of the fragility of memory, Morpheus never says the words, "What if I told you?" in the Matrix film series. And for a collective of people to remember something that never happened is referred to as the Mandela effect. According to psychologist Frederick Bartlett, they are derived from schema-driven errors, from formats in which we logically organize and guide our memory. Schemas facilitate understanding of material, but because they're filtered through what we think is universally logical, they can easily be distorted. So what if I told you the ridiculous petty revelation is that you may well be the everyone which is no one? We ignore many things that did happen. Important aspects of human history and knowledge have and continue to be hidden from us. Ignorance and confusion uphold the continuously updated 500-year-old matrix of power, and it emboldens the agents, those who are enacting an artificial intelligence, a made-up incomplete collection of knowledge and history of which conspiracy theories are an extreme, sometimes unconsciously, at others unconsciously, yet maintaining the matrix. To those who feel uncomfortable, sacrifice your imaginary comfort to shift human consciousness. Learn the hidden context of our human experience for the hope and possibility of less hate, less pain, protect our planet and human lives. To those agents who unapologetically uphold supremacy, as Neo says, I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how this is going to begin. And I will leave you with a few of my words. Perhaps you're angry about the exposure and want to gaslight the world and tell everyone that people like me are the bullies. And I'm sure you have plenty of questions and are longing for me to do all the work for you. But no. Instead, imagine all of our questions, echoing thousands of intergenerational voices beyond the dimensions of life and death. Oh, you cannot imagine our questions? Then make it a point to learn our questions. Do the work. The choice can be yours. To those who long for liberation, please excuse me. I am aware that my language and expression has become limited by my academic formation. The struggle is ongoing. Finally, I want to share that I'm wearing a Chinanteca huipil from Oaxaca, representing the passage of the Chinanteca woman from life to death. I want to thank the families in Oaxaca who are passing on knowledge in traditional indigenous formats and ways and sharing them with the world. And finally, to all the people in the struggle, we define the future.